Update 6.5 is out now, and we have 6 new refines to talk about, a good bit of stuff to go over, so you want to know if your precious divine dew is worth the effort. Today we have refines for Gharnef, Thea, Kaden, Picnic, Felicia, Idunn, and Duma as our mythic remix for the month. We'll discuss what each new refine does and talk about some general playstyles and builds. First up is Gharnef, one of our lovely red Grand Hero battle mages with a somewhat gimmicky tome. Imhullu did not get rid of its niche and still grants Gharnef an extra +3 res. On turn 3, it deals 7 damage to any unit who is not a mage within 5 columns centered on Gharnef, and it inflicts the flash status, aka prevents the foe from counterattacking. Additionally, if Gharnef initiates combat or is solo, he gets +5 attack and speed during combat. So, base Imhullu is basically the same. We went from 5 damage to 7. It uses the term non-magic, but know that this only refers to mages and does not affect dragons or healers. With its turn 3 effect, Gharnef gets an attack and speed boost, which is interesting because Gharnef is one of our red Grand Hero battle mages who isn't that slow. The refine invests further into speed since at start of combat, if Gharnef has more than 25% HP, he gets another +5 attack and speed, and also if the foe is a non-mage, he reduces damage from their attacks by 30%, and he also prevents their counterattack. Overall, very neat refine. Gharnef gets +10 attack and speed on top of his 30 attack, 34 speed base stats, and in addition to the turn 3 mechanic, he also always gets damage reduction and prevents counterattacks against non-mage enemies. This is great since you don't need to rely on turn 3 to attack safely, and without the greatest defensive res, 30% damage reduction is always nice to have. This is almost like a fire sweep tome, or you could think of it like a wind sweep tome since it's targeted at everyone except mages. Adding in dragons and healers is a nice touch, but obviously Gharnef doesn't get most of these perks if he does fight a mage. That is kind of his downside here outside of the turn 3 flash status and auto combat damage. You can pull off some team attacks with the flash status on foes, but Imhullu's refine helps Gharnef be more proactive by himself. I like the focus on speed compared to the usual attack and res like a lot of red mages follow. In terms of builds, Gharnef is a lot more proactive now. You do not need to wait for turn 3, although you can if you want. With +10 attack and speed and fire sweep against anything but a mage, you could just go full attack and speed with attack and speed solo, low speed of some kind, and try out the brand new Speed Smoke 4. Tier 4 smokes are on the Fallen banner coming up, and they are spicy, with Speed Smoke 4 granting +6 speed buff to the user and dodge after attacking. In a similar manner to attack and speed menace, you get a huge speed advantage, and Gharnef can pair dodge with his 30% damage reduction. Very interesting potential for a class type that doesn't get damage reduction very easily. In fact, pair this with no follow-up and you almost have the standard sword infantry setup. No follow-up can let Gharnef safely double tanks, and taking only one hit with damage reduction is great against follow-up dependent foes. For other non-Speed Smoke 4 skills, you could go with the usual Menace C skills or the staple times Pulse. Fatal Smoke could be an interesting option if you plan to take advantage of Imhullu's turn 3 chip damage. For example, you could run Savage Blow or Poison Strike, and Fatal Smoke prevents healing, while Gharnef gets to apply them safely. If you aren't going hardcore investment, there are some budget skills you can try out. Attack and Speed Ideal 3 is fine since Gharnef can avoid taking hits, and Attack and Speed Oath is a fun field buff to add more stats. If you're fine countering one enemy type, a Breaker B skill can replicate no follow-up. Unfortunately, Ascended Fjord doesn't care about Imhullu's fire sweep effect, so that's definitely something to consider. Overall, I think Imhullu got a really fun refine, almost turning it into a full fire sweep tome while investing in Gharnef's speed to make him a bit more unique. While its one turn gimmick can be hit or miss, Gharnef is now much more useful outside of just turn 3. Next up is Thea, one of our many 3 to 4 star Alliance flyers. Thea has a rather generous stat spread with decent speed and higher defense and res than most other units in the same class. Her attack and HP aren't super amazing, so let's see what her new Icy Maltet can do. First off, don't worry, this Maltet is nowhere near Brave Hector levels of stupid. This cooler version focuses on dragon flowers. At start of turn, if Thea has 10 or more dragon flowers, she gets a +6 attack and defense field buff for the turn. If foe initiates combat or has more than 75% HP, she gets bonus stats based on the number of dragon flowers on her. If she has at least 1 dragon flower, she gets +5 stats. Otherwise, at no dragon flowers, she still gets +4 stats. Finally, if Thea has at least 5 dragon flowers on her, she gets a guard. Icy Maltet has one heck of a base description, and honestly, it's not that bad for a 3 to 4 star unit. Generally, most people grabbing this refine already invested in Thea, and if you have the dragon flowers on her, then she makes it worth your time with just free stats, some field buffs, and the useful guard effect. Like her sister Farina, Thea should ideally be paid upfront if you plan to use her seriously. Now, for the refined portion, if unit is within 3 spaces of an ally, grant +4 to all stats and grants bonus doubler. So even more stats for Thea, and she has bonus doubler, which explains the attack and defense field buffs from the base effect. In total, Thea can get a very easy +9 to all stats, and then double her field buffs, which she already provides half herself. Add in guard and you have a very simple stat stacking unit. With merges and the dragon flowers, Thea easily hits the 40s for defense and res, and her speed will be in a decent spot as well. She also gets some decent attack boost considering she has the self attack field buff plus bonus doubler. All in all, a very jack of all trades type weapon to match Thea's balanced spread of stats. Now, as the saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none is pretty applicable here. While guard and bonus doubler are nice along with easy stats, she isn't the most specialized toward offense or defense, so your builds can vary greatly here. For example, if you just want to stack more stats, you can go with catch 4, near trace, and rain C skills. You can stack the in-combat debuffs of near trace and rains for more stat advantages, and of course Kanto is just fun and useful. Thea can easily run any of these stat variants like attack and speed and defense, or a mix of the two. For some other skills, since she has guard in her weapon, you can run A skills like Unity, Bond 4, or Distant Counter, although watch out for archers. Thea could run the mixed phase set of impact A skills with guard bearing, although like with Gharnef, Speed Smoke 4 opens the door for dodge usage. Very interesting for a flyer. For more offensive plays, Flow Guard is not necessary, so Thea can instead run Flow Refresh instead. Menace skills are options as well, but Thea already buffs her own attack and defense via her refine, so maybe not super necessary. Speaking of field buffs, budget way to get speed and res field buffs is Speed and Res Oath from Dithorba. It's a self-sufficient way to make the most of bonus doubler, but feel free to bring your buffing allies instead. Overall, Thea's Icy Maltet requires a bit of a down payment, but you get some very nice perks if you're a fan of unit types who can basically run anything. A lot of builds freedom for Thea, and she can definitely run the more common budget options like Desperation, Swiss Barrel, Fury. And I'll end this by saying that with max investment, maybe this Thea can also run the more unusual Pegasus or Wyvern Flight, or maybe Flow Flight. Our third refine is going to go to Kaden, a green base cavalry unit and one of the retired 5-star Stunnable units. Kaden's Kitsune Fang actually keeps its old effect since it was pretty decent. He gets a flat +3 defense and grants allies within 2 spaces a bonus to their attack, speed, defense, or res during combat, equal to the current bonus on each of Kaden's own stats. Basically, if Kaden has a +6 attack field buff, he gives +6 attack to all his allies. Now, if you spend Divine Dew, he's also going to get +5 attack and speed during combat if he's within 3 spaces of any ally. More attack and speed is appreciated for Kaden himself since Kitsune Fang doesn't actually help him in his own battles. Now, for the refined portion, it's worded quite strangely and it's got a mistranslation for the English version, so I've rewritten it here. Basically, Kaden gets another +5 attack and speed if he's within 3 spaces of an ally, so the exact same effect as the base weapon. The next part, which is currently wrong, the correct version, according to people who have tested it out, is that Kaden grants +2 defense and res and guard to allies within 2 spaces of Kaden. This effect is essentially the Tannin Baton plus staff, which grants an AoE guard buff to allies. Kaden does not get guard himself. Instead, all he gets is +10 attack and speed. That's basically it. Kitsune Fang is mainly about buffing your team, and the refine adds guard into the mix with +2 defense and res. This is actually pretty dang good for a support effect because guard is very nice to have for defensive units, and if Kaden can't provide it, then your tank can run another skill like Unity or Bond 4. Your far or near safe arm unit no longer needs a tier 3 dual stance, crafty fighter, or special fighter. They can run slick fighter, Unity, or anything else. Kaden basically adds the Tannin Baton to his in-combat buffs, so watch out if you encounter one in PvP. Now for personal combat, Kaden still isn't exactly super crazy. Like Gharnef, he buffs up his attack and speed, which is great, but Kaden's not exactly getting extra defensive perks besides the Beast Transformation bonus, which is a mini impact effect. Admittedly, it's not bad, and the Cavalry Beast units are basically meant to be player phase initiators. For Kaden, since Kitsune Fang technically doesn't require Kaden to run field buffs himself, you can just use a standard offensive build. There are some overlap with Thea here with skills like Catch 4, Near Trace Kanto, and I do think Kaden is another Speed Smoke 4 potential user. He does not have amazing defensive stats, so dodge would be appreciated. With a mini impact effect when transformed, you can run lulls just fine, and Sword Sparrow or solo skills are fun as well. Keep in mind, Kaden does not get guard, and Beast cannot run flow guard, so that's quite a bummer. Now if you want to help Kaden out actually get field buffs, then he has speed and res linked by default. Ideally he's going to swap or reposition an ally to buff himself and that unit. Kitsune Fang then passes another +6 speed and res to the team. Kaden also has Gold Beast to further buff Beast allies, and you can now run the Ward Beast Sacred Seal if you want to stack all the uncommon buffs. You can of course exchange these for things like Joint Distant Guard or Close Guard. In terms of C skills, there are the Joint Hone Field buffs to buff Kaden. They are pretty rare however, and wave buffs just aren't that consistent. Rouse C skills can be great, but they require Kaden to be solo, and that's not exactly the best condition for a unit who wants to stay near his team to buff them up. Basically, if you run Kaden, it's probably best to have a unit who actually buffs the whole team. For example, Faye's Eternal Breath is a very basic +5 doll stats for herself and nearby allies. Faye would give everyone +5 field buffs. Kitsune Fang doubles that with the new Guard add-on. There are some other newer units who buff themselves and the team, like Medeus or Ashura. You also got classics like Astra. Maybe the Marts with Shining Emblem or Fire Emblem can be good teammates as well. Generally speaking, Kaden adds some nice attack and speed for himself, but getting the AoE guard for Kitsune Fang really synergizes with his support identity. Not a bad upgrade if you liked using him already. Our 4th refine goes to Picnic Felicia, an X-Arm unit, and our seasonal refine for this month. Some of you might have picked up her forma, so let's see what she's got. Her X, Eldhrimnir, got a buff to its ult effect. It's still effective against beast units and grants +3 speed. At start of combat, if Felicia has more res than the foe, inflict penalty on foes' attack, speed, and defense during combat equal to 80% of the difference of res stats before combat. Max is -8 to those stats. In addition, grant +4 all stats when above 25% HP. So, Eldhrimnir got rewritten a little bit, but it's essentially the same. Felicia does a res check before combat starts and now inflicts defense debuffs, which is very good since her base attack is not that high. Before she had to win the res check by 16 to get the maximum -8 debuffs, now you just have to win by 10 res for the max value. For the refined portion, if foe initiates or has more than 75% HP, Felicia gets another +4 to all stats, neutralizes effects that guarantee the foe swap attacks, and if she wins a second res check during combat, she gets 30% damage reduction for 1 hit. So if you're wondering why this refine may seem familiar, that's because it's very close to Selkie's refine from last month. Once again, we have to do 2 separate res checks, and Felicia has the potential to get +16 to all stats if you convert the debuffs she inflicts. Besides the stat boost, Felicia is more defensive than Selkie by getting damage reduction and defensive no follow-up. She also has a bit more base stats to work with as an arm unit, but her attack and defense are not that high, similar to Selkie. Felicia has somewhat high speed for an army unit, and 35 res is decent, but again, you can definitely struggle to hit the max debuff values unless you put some investment on her. Like with any unit who does flat stat checks before combat, you really want to give them anything that boosts their flat stats, like summon support, merges, dragon flowers, or even blessings. There's also field buffs and debuffs, and so keep that in mind. While looking at this refine, I do feel like they tried to make it work with Felicia's default special fighter. While no longer the super popular build since save skills entered the game, speedy special fighter arm units can still be a huge pain to deal with. They can basically stat check you hard if unprepared, and Felicia can indeed do that with her decent speed, the +8 boost, and the potential -8 speed debuffs. She can also charge up a very scary Glacius proc pretty quickly, and in general you want a more mixed phase B skill, special fighter still works. Once again, Speed Smoke 4 is just a scary potential problem, although it's a lot tougher to utilize when your unit can only move 1 space. If it does proc though, the enemy team could be super screwed since Felicia's gonna get big speed advantages and she gets dodge on top of her 30% damage reduction. It is important to know that Felicia has to win the in-combat res check to get her damage reduction, so like with Dragon Wall, you cannot ignore stacking res against other high res units. Now let's talk about what most people would choose to run, and that's near or far save. You could substitute Special Fighter out if you want Felicia to double attackers who can prevent follow-up attacks. With Slick Fighter, she ignores debuffs, which is great, and she has Quick Repose to cancel out enemy skills. She also can then win the speed check against slower units to get that double. Similar idea with Savvy Fighter, and while Felicia already has part of no follow-up, she gets to add another 30% damage reduction with her refine. If you miss the extra cooldown reduction, you can take a Breath Sacred Seal of your choosing. Like with Selkie, you do need to make some choices. How much flat res is enough for Felicia? If you do not win the first res check, you're going to lose out on a lot of debuffs, and losing the second res check means no damage reduction. You could run Fortress Defense and Res 3, but you don't get extra combat perks. like Unity and you lose some attack. For Selkie, I mentioned Demon Servant's Menace as a niche synergy, but she has 3 movement to make attacks, whereas that's a bit tougher for Felicia to take advantage of. It might be easier just to bring teammates who can buff her up, not to mention you won't get to run a save C skill. Last thing I want to talk about is that Felicia is one of the few units with a beast effective weapon. All beast units are melee, so she could have a niche place as a near saver who can get that extra damage against beast attackers. There just so happens to be one game-breaking beast unit out there that Felicia might be able to stop, although you're gonna need to find a way to bypass Warrior Fighter. Rush checking Fallen NATO Guard may also be an issue, so yeah, ideally you're not using, or if you're gonna use Picnic Felicia seriously, she has to have some sort of investment to help her out. Overall, pretty interesting refine, and I do wonder what they're going to do with Picnic Flora, who is a bit different from her sister next month. Next we have our Mythic refine for Duma, an Anima Mythic, and Colorless Armored Dragon. Duma's Fell Breath did not get any major changes, but now allows Duma to do an attack check at the start of combat to get his +6 attack and res and full up denial. Pretty basic tank ability, so what does the refine do? If Duma initiates combaters within 2 spaces of an ally, he gets +5 attack, inflicts -5 attack, and reduces damage from the foe's first attack by 30%. Additionally, if Duma has more attack than the foe's res, he deals extra damage equal to 30% of his attack minus the foe's res for 1 hit. So this refine is actually a sort of mixed phase version of the very rare Dragon's Wrath B skill, also known as the combination of Nifla and Muspel's unique passives. Duma will get some damage reduction with attack debuffs, and he's going to get bonus damage with attack buffs. In addition to the refine, as part of his Mythic remix, Upheaval got upgraded. At start of turn 1, deal 10 damage to all foes, and if defending an Anima Seasons, destroy the nearest offense structure. At start of combat, if Duma has more attack than the foe, or the foe has less than 4 HP, he then neutralizes their field buffs as well. So, Upheaval Plus basically is an extension of Fell Breath. The buff neutralization has the same conditions as the base effect of Fell Breath. Now, along with the increase in damage on turn 1, Duma will now always destroy an offense structure, unless it's non-destroyable like your fortress. In fact, Upheaval can destroy 2 structures if they are the same amount of spaces away, so things can get pretty interesting depending on your layout. Keep in mind, Duma users can also use the Catapult defense structure, or even bring another Duma for more destruction. 20 chip damage is pretty nasty if the enemy has no way to heal up. Now, while all of this is fun, we got a pretty big counter to this type of skill thanks to Eldhrimnir with False Start. If you don't force Eldhrimnir to choose between false starting Duma or another ally, then she can just disable Upheaval on turn 1, then move on to the next unit later on. As for the actual combat portion of Fell Breath, it's not too shabby. Duma's going to get a lot of extra damage on top of his already pretty high attack stat. Dragon's Wrath provides extra one-time damage, but Duma is already getting +11 attack, and he has some defensive tools as well. In terms of builds and playstyles, well, Upheaval Plus is a nice upgrade if you like destroying structures. It will always hit something now, and 10 damage adds up. As part of his remix, Duma is going to get Fury 4 for free. It helps with his at start of combat attack check, but that's about it. While getting +4 to all stats isn't bad, Duma will hurt himself a bunch, and one of his main issues is actually getting to the fight. He is a 1 movement army unit, so mobility is not great without armor march, and if you want to use Upheaval, you cannot run a save C skill. Duma can do some damage with things like Bold Fighter, but actually getting to attack before the rest of his team is dead is problematic, not to mention he cannot get those bonus blessing stats. Since long-term fighting is an issue, you could try to put Duma up front and try to let him just do as much damage as possible. You could run Glimmer with Steady Breath and try to abuse his high attack for more Glimmer damage, plus you have the Dragon's Wrath effect as well. In fact, you could run the B-skill version of Dragon's Wrath, or you could run Muspel, and now you have distant counter skills with bonus attack added on. It's not a very mechanical setup, but we aren't expecting Duma to be fighting for very long. For some other skills, there are various armored B skills like Special Fighter, Crafty, or Slick Fighter. Dragon's Ire isn't bad either since it lets Duma get 2 attacks in. But no follow-up can shut that down pretty quickly. If you do want to try to burst down squishier threats, damage reduction is always an issue to look out for with this playstyle. No real way around it just yet besides just hitting harder. Overall, Duma's Refine and Remix aren't terrible, but being able to actually use his combat power is still an issue, unless you swap Upheaval for Savior or you have Armor March movement with Bold Fighter or Wings of Mercy or something like that. It can be tough for him to make a difference in 8th raids. Upheaval Plus can be good since it still always hits a structure now, but of course, if you face Eldhrimnir a lot, then that could be all for nothing. Regardless, be sure to pick it up since it's free as long as you got some SP. Last up is Idunn, a red armored dragon. We recently got her ascended form, so let's see what version 1.0 brings to the table now. First off, Demonic Breath did not undergo big changes. It still neutralizes penalties and grants plus for all stats with armor effectiveness and +3 defense. It works when Idunn is hurt at all, and now works on the enemy phase all the time without needing a penalty on her. For the refined portion, if foe initiates combat or has 175% HP, grant +5 attack, inflict -5 attack on the foe, and if foe makes a follow-up attack, Idunn gets 70% damage reduction for the first hit. Oh boy, so Idunn is going the Valentine's Gustav route with a fat amount of damage reduction for one hit. She can't instant counter with bonfires, but she still has a lot of stats to work with, and is going to be insanely hard to one-shot without damage reduction nullification. Idunn has always been a very bulky unit, and that is not changing with this refine. She can be a real pain in the butt, and that's worse now with the extra attack debuffs as a big chunk of damage reduction. Some big benefits for Idunn is that she has armor effectiveness, and that's nice if you need to duke it out with other armor units. She also has adaptive damage versus ranged foes, and that can allow her to disintegrate squishy low defense attackers. Something noteworthy about all the Idunns is that her base 26 speed isn't super low considering she gets +4 speed from Demonic Breath. This is actually can be an issue with a certain skill, which we'll talk about very shortly. In terms of builds, to no surprise, this refine just makes Idunn an even better save army unit. If you already gave her near or far save, then no problems here. You may already have a perfectly fine kit. If you're looking for a quick riposte skill, I think Crafty Fighter is great since it gives Idunn guard. She could be getting doubled, so guard prevents a special proc on the second hit, whereas Idunn doesn't have the big damage reduction. Of course, with tempo in the game now and no guard being on more units, it might not matter, but hey, it's still a good trait to bring. In terms of damage, Idunn could use her adaptive damage with Steady Breath, Distant Counter, and Glimmer to deliver a quick counterattack before the foe gets a second hit off. You reduce their attack by 70%, then you just KO them on the counter. Let's now talk about Hardy Fighter. First off, no slaying on her weapon means you cannot instantly charge Aegis or Pavis for the big 75% damage reduction. That said, because Idunn already has 70% damage reduction for her first hit taken, you can still run these 3 cooldown specials to charge them in time for the enemy's second hit. 70% damage reduction, then 75% damage reduction is just demoralizing, but special timings could get messed up here. There's also the issue of speed. Like I mentioned earlier, Idunn might be too fast for her own good. She has to get doubled to get the damage reduction, but Hardy Fighter neutralizes the enemy's follow-up skills, meaning if they don't beat Idunn in speed, she's not going to get doubled, so no 70% damage reduction. A really slow nuker might be able to severely hurt Idunn in this scenario, so it's worth noting. With that said, if you're just afraid of damage reduction nullification skills, then you could still run Hardy Fighter with 2 cooldown specials and the Breath Sacred Seals. 50% damage reduction is better than nothing, and that might be all you need to mess with the enemy team. Last, I got some extra skills to discuss. Again, if you're running a save build and plan to get doubled, I would suggest guard from something like Crafty Fighter or a dual stance. Idunn could also still run Special Fighter, or she could use Dragon Wall for just more damage reduction stacking. There is also room for speed focused builds since again Idunn does have some speed to play with. She's not blazing fast, but she isn't super slow either. Just remember that if she doesn't get doubled, you don't get 70% damage reduction, so if you go full speed, you may be banking on pure defense and res at that point. Not that Idunn is squishy regardless. Overall, solid or fine for an already decent armor unit. She may not negate armor effectiveness like her new ult does, and she's still weak to falchions, but the OG Idunn is still certainly good. That's it for the update 6.5 refines. Please feel free to share your own thoughts and builds for these refines, and do you plan to use anyone yourself? Up next we have this year's Fallen banner, which is spicing things up with some new inheritable skills I've already discussed here. We got an interesting Grand Hero battle unit to talk about, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.